Just want to thank you all for joining us today for our faculty FaceTime. I'm Hasina Mohyuddin. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion here at Peabody. We're really excited to have Professor Eve Rifkin with us today and to have Ray King facilitate the discussion. Before we begin, I just would like to share that if you look at the left-hand corner of your screen, you will see that we have Otter AI Live Notes. And if you need any kind of transcription to kind of help you understand, listen to the recording, you can click on that and see the transcription of our conversation. I also want to let you know that we are recording this session. That you are aware of that. And I'd love, we're a little bit bigger group, so if we could put in the chat, like our name and our association with Peabody, so we just know who's in the group, that would be great. And I'm just really excited to have both Eve and Ray here today. Eve is a lecturer in Peabody's Department of Leadership Policy Organizations and director of the Leadership and Learning in Organizations program, an innovative educational doctoral degree program that supports mid-career professionals across a range of industries. Dr. Rifkin holds an EDD in Leadership and Policy from Vanderbilt and is the co-founder of City High School in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Rifkin has over 25 years of experience in designing schools, both nationally and globally, informing state-level policy and supporting professional learning communities of both teachers and school leaders throughout the country. And we're so excited to have you, Eve.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And to facilitate the discussion, we have Ray King, who is a doctoral student in the Leadership and Learning in Organizations program at Peabody. And as a nonprofit leader, Ray has served as the Equity and Learning Director for City Year in New York. She also chairs the board of directors for a local Brooklyn nonprofit, Read 718, which specializes in providing one-on-one tutoring to low-income students. And in response to COVID, Ray actually recognized a major gap in kids' enrichment opportunities and started her own nonprofit called Hands in Learning, an education group providing academic and arts classes for families all over the world, regardless of their ability to pay. And I'm so excited to have the both of you and to be part of this conversation. I do know that there are a lot of us on the call today, so I would invite you, at least for the first part of this conversation, to stop your video and go to your video settings to hide non-video participants, just so that we can kind of center Ray and Eve in their discussion, and then we'll bring you back when we open up the discussion for questions. And now I'm just gonna turn it over to Ray.
Thank you so much, Hasina. I am really honored to be able to have this conversation, especially during such a critical moment in our country. I mean, I just don't think that there are too many conversations that we could be having that are more relevant than what Eve and I are going to be talking about today. So I'm really honored to be able to facilitate this discussion with one of my favorite professors, I can say, of all time, honestly. Thankfully, this will be my last degree. And so I can say that, how much I appreciate Eve. I'll start out by sharing a quick little story of how I really came to appreciate Eve as a professor, and especially as it relates to topics around DEI. So when I started this program in the spring, I was really excited, didn't really know what to expect, but was glad to have found this program because it really aligned with my interests. As we got a few weeks into our learning and everything, I actually found myself a bit dismayed, and Eve knows this, maybe even a bit disappointed and kind of wondering like if I had made the right decision to attend a predominantly white institution like Vanderbilt, because as I don't know if you all can see in my shirt, but I'm representing Spelman College today, where I received my undergrad, and really came to appreciate all that I had learned there about scholarship from Black scholars and thinkers, and found that sorely missing so far in my program at Vanderbilt. And these were just my own private musings, things that I was wondering about. And then one day in class, I don't know what brought the discussion up. It was around the time where George Floyd had been killed, and this was on everybody's minds. And Eve actually opened up the class and gave us space to kind of talk about all these things that we were learning and reading about as it related to leadership, and to connect it to what was going on in our country at that moment. And she made the space feel so safe that I was like, actually, I'm having a bit of a struggle here with my decision to attend Vanderbilt and what I'm reading, and the kind of the diversity that I feel like it's lacking. And right away, Eve was like, yeah, let's talk about it. And I was like, okay. And just that she opened up that space, it really helped me to feel like, you know what, maybe I didn't make a mistake, and maybe this is a place where someone like me can have the freedom to express these issues and these concerns without fear of any kind of retribution, or like, well, we don't talk about that here. And so, Eve, my first question to you really is, was that like a deliberate decision on your part to make sure that you are, as the program director, which I'm not even sure you were in the spring of the LLO program yet,
No.
but what about your view, your way of being and showing up, and the things that are important to you made it important for you to make that kind of space and connect and make sure we weren't just glossing over what was happening in the world as we went through this program?
That's a great question. I remember that moment crystal clear, because you said, Ray, that you were tracking the readings in the class, and you had actually started to create a spreadsheet, and you were tracking who these scholars were. And you said, am I ever going to read somebody that looks like me, or hear about an issue that is more relevant to me? And so I also remember that moment. And, you know, when you ask if it's a deliberate decision, my commitment to the learning space is, it's long and old. I've been, working in learning spaces as an educator for 25 years. And so I would say that in that moment, how I responded was I did not take a second and think, how am I going to sort of strategically engage in this conversation, so that it was more of the habits that I've developed over the years as somebody who cares very deeply about supporting and sustaining inclusive learning spaces. And, for me, what's exciting about this program, and I think we're evolving, is that a learning program is one that goes into those hard spaces, right? In that moment, I was being a learner. You pointed something out, and I had probably a couple of choices. I could have glossed over it, like you said, and said, okay, well, that's interesting. What's next? Or I could have maybe gotten defensive, which never ends well. And we've seen that, right? Or I could have joined you, which is what I did. Like, let's wrestle with this together. I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree. You are absolutely right. This is not a matter of perspective or interpretation. It is true that this is feels like a predominantly white curriculum. And so that's where that came from. It was a wanting to join you in that wondering. And I think the byproduct of that is what you walked away with, Ray, right? Yeah. Like, that was a signal, but I wasn't sending it as a signal, but it does work that way.
Yeah, which is important. And it's something that I know you and I have talked about before. When you are a member of a marginalized group that doesn't often get to see yourself represented, whether that's a woman, a person of color, a member of the LGBTQ community, religious minority, when you're someone that doesn't often get to see yourself reflected, you look for those signals, honestly. When you're in class, when you're in meetings, when you're in a job interview, you are looking for indications that you are safe, and that you are seen. And so even though you did not mean that response to necessarily be a clear signal for me, it was. it was that for me and a lot of my classmates, to say, okay, this is a person that we are safe to at least raise these issues with. Not that you'll always agree or that we'll always see it the same way, but it's a safe space for us to put our wondering and ask those questions. And it meant everything. And it's the reason I keep paying my tuition and sticking with this program. So when we talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it can mean so many different things.
Yeah.
I'm wondering for you as the program director at LLO, what does it mean to you to be attentive for the LLO program to be attentive to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
You know, the meaning of DEI for me is really an urgency. It's a sense of duty and a sense of obligation in the most elevated manner. So it's not a sort of a checklist or a box for me to check. It is it's a commitment, again, to making sure that we have a learning environment in which every single person can stretch and grapple with complex issues, can change their minds about things, and can connect with each other. And so we can't have that without careful tending to DEI. Now, DEI just sort of, it's like this nice little 3-letter thing that or EDI, right? At Vanderbilt, I found that it's framed as EDI. I always say DEI. But the point is that sometimes we blob these 3 things together and we forget that they don't actually go together unless you make sure they go together. Mm. We have to think about DEI as a system, not as a list of 3 things or 3 words that make us feel good when we say them out loud. It is very easy to have diversity without equity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's probably a more common situation that we find ourselves in. It's not, in fact, that difficult to bring in diverse communities of people and have, you know, different colors and different backgrounds sitting at your table. But that's very dangerous and can feel violent for people if you feel like diversity is first and then you check the diversity box and you're not tending carefully to the equity and inclusion piece. You've now just created a very unfortunate situation, to put it mildly. We also know that talk about equity and inclusion without diversity is kind of hollow. So to be in a homogenous space to talk about inclusion, but what are we talking about? You know, we're all here, right? And so when I think about
scholars, Dr. Darnisa Amante talks about this idea of urgency without competency. And that's what I think of in hearing what you're saying. You know, it's very easy to bring in all these diverse, you know, groups of people and bodies in seats and everything. But if you have not prepared the space, if you're not prepared the hearts and the minds of people, to be inclusive, and to what a lot of other organizations are adding is this idea of belonging. Do I feel like I belong in this space? If you haven't prepped it for that, then like you said, you use the word violent, and I completely agree with that.
And, you know, belonging, Ray, is not belonging is the result of inclusivity, right? If I don't feel like I belong, then you have not done your inclusivity work. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you can say inclusivity until the cows come home, but if people are leaving, whatever experience it is, not having a sense of belonging, and that can only come from participants. That's a subjective experience. It's perceptual. You have to ask people, right? You have to ask people the right questions. Do you feel like you belong here? Yeah. And if people feel that they do not belong, then the inclusivity work is not deep enough. It's not rigorous enough.
And so how are you thinking about that specifically with the LLO program? You know, I know that you're newly, you know, the director.
Yeah.
And we've gotten the emails about some different initiatives that are taking place, but like best case scenario, if you could just have the power to set directives or not necessarily policies and things, again, all that's not what changes hearts and minds oftentimes, but in a best case scenario, how does the LLO program ensure that students from diverse backgrounds experience that inclusivity? And if we were to take a survey at the end of our semesters, we check yes, like this is a place that I feel like I belong. How does the LLO program help make that happen?
Yeah, so that is the best case scenario, right? that people leave the LLO program saying, yes, I belong here. I have belonged here. And so we know that happens at multiple levels. It does happen at the policy level. It happens, diversity is not the only thing, but it's not a small thing, right? We have to think more assertively about our faculty. We cannot, a student of mine, one of our students in the LLO program reminded me, and I had heard it before, you can't be what you can't see, right? This is a Black man educational leader who has not had a Black male instructor in this program. Mm-hmm. And so we have to start with diversity and make sure that we are putting a lot of energy and effort into making sure that we're attracting and recruiting and sustaining, right, a diverse faculty for this program. It doesn't end there, though. We have to also think about our curriculum. Who are we reading? What are the issues that we are having opportunities to grapple with in class? Who are the scholars? What are the topics? And then the third one, and this is a big one, which is pedagogy. And this might be the one that is the most sort of nuancey, right? And we've talked about this, Ray. What are people doing? Back to how you opened, right? How it felt to be in that class. So, I'm a white person, I'm an instructor, but I did something. I sent a signal. I created a sense that I created a message that said to you, you belong here, that this is a place where you get to share these concerns. That comes with support. It comes with showing people what it looks like. It comes from relationships. It comes from instructors being willing and comfortable enough to hear from students that aren't feeling a sense of belonging and sitting in those uncomfortable conversations. So I think it's like a multi-pronged approach where we're thinking about who is it in the space, or who are we looking at? Who do we see when we show up? But it's also, how does it feel when we're in there? You can read Black scholars and Latinx scholars, and you can look at issues of equity and diversity in your scholarship, but if the pedagogy is not there to create conversations that allow for disagreement and wondering and difficult conversations, then that's not enough either. So it's that systemic approach, and that's how we get there. Agreed. And we get there we got to just keep trying, and we got to keep doing things.
And I see some of it, like you talk about a multi-pronged approach. I see in some of my other classes that I've had and with some of my other professors, like, it might not be the multi-pronged thing. It might be they're just here, they're just at a place where they're introducing a video featuring a Black male speaker. And that's where they are right now. And they might not have a whole lot on the pedagogy side of things to say about it and to delve into it and to help expound on it. But for them, introducing this video and choosing this video over a myriad of others that could be chosen, like that's where they are right now.
That's right.
And I see the difference. Not everyone is ready to like fully sit in that space. One of my projects that I had to do for a particular class said that we had to put together these proposals, and it said, pretend that the people that you are presenting to, one of the things that they really care about is DEI, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so for me, like, I recognize that as a deliberate attempt towards attending to diversity within the curriculum, but it really did just stay there. Like, within the course of our class, we didn't delve into why and how and what that means. And so, like, I see what you're saying in terms of like the different layers of it, you know,
Yeah.
and some people are at a more introductory point with it, while other professors or other, you know, parts of our curriculum like may completely go there, you know. And I think it's important for us as students to recognize that, you know, we may have different experiences in different classes depending on where our professors are. But a question that I have is, how deliberate is Peabody, Vanderbilt, trying to be right now in pushing our professors to move from diversity to equity to inclusion and belonging?
You know, I think that I feel very strongly that Peabody is very committed to this work on a deep and meaningful and truly authentic level. And I say that from firsthand experiences that I am having with my colleagues in the Office of EDI, Hasina and Dwayne Watson, who are here, Hasina Mohyuddin and Dwayne Watson, who are here and have been hosting monthly workshops where faculty members can bring their most troubling work to a group of colleagues and think about issues of EDI in a facilitated space. I see that Peabody has set goals, intentional goals around increasing diversity of faculty, committing to professional development, ongoing professional development, being really transparent around data. I see the university committing more resources to this work. I'm thinking right now, as we speak, about the difference between commitment, being committed, and being deliberate. And I think that there's a movement. There's a how you feel in your heart and how you feel in your mind, and then there's a what you do with those feelings. And I'm not skeptical at all. I believe the commitment is there, and I believe the desire to be deliberate is there. It's what does the deliberate part look like? What does the action part look like? And I'm just like you're seeing signals in your classroom. I'm seeing signals, you know, just to be transparent, just like you were wondering, Ray, is this the right place for me? As you know, as somebody who's been committed to issues of equity and social justice for a long time, I'm always looking around Peabody College for the most part, and Vanderbilt University. Is this a place for me? Is this a place where my commitment to social justice and equity work is going to be supported and challenged in important ways? And I am getting a strong yes. And so the commitment is there, the goals are set, and I'm seeing the work happen. As we speak right now, right, the LPO, Leadership Policy and Organization department is having its inaugural meeting for their student EDI committee. And that student group will serve as an important channel of advising and information to the department. The LLO program will be launching its own programmatic EDI advisory council. So I think it's strong. I believe that it's strong. There is something that I wanted to kind of push back a little bit, or let's take this a little bit further. So Ray, you said that, and I hope that answers your question. You said, Ray, that we have to recognize that people are in different places, right? Like for that one instructor to show that one YouTube video, right? Like maybe that's where they are. And you know, and you said not everybody is ready to sit in that space. And I think about the hard work and courage and determination and resilience that, like, I think about Stacey Abrams. I've been thinking about Stacey Abrams actually for 4 years. I'm certainly thinking about Stacey, right? Your Spelman sister, right? Didn't she go to, she was a Spelman. And I think about, like, not ready to sit in that space, right? And like not comfortable. And then I think about Stacey Abrams. Like, we have to go there. we have to be willing to get a little uncomfortable. We have to take risks. And then what comes with that is we have to have colleagues, and we have to have that support.
But you know what, Eve, this is where I do get a little skeptical, right?
Okay.
Because this is just you and I having a conversation, right?
Yeah, I turned off everybody's cameras. So
right. So
there's 47 people here listening to us, which is cool.
Right. So I'm just gonna be honest, like, having served as a director of DEI, oh my gosh, it was the hardest job I've ever had in my life. And what you're saying right now is exactly what I was always saying. Like, we have to be willing to sit in our discomfort. But saying that and convincing people that it is safe to do so, or maybe not safe, but that it is important and required to do so, is just a completely different thing. And so I've learned to kind of have a little more grace, I guess, like, yeah, I'm with you. Stacey Abrams is my Spelman sister. And as Black women, we don't get the choice to just be like, I don't want to be uncomfortable today, right? Because I'm going to go into the office and somebody's going to touch my hair, or somebody's going to, commit some other kind of microaggression, and I'm uncomfortable, right? Immediately, I don't get to say, I don't feel like being uncomfortable today. And so I'm with you on pushing people to kind of sit in that discomfort and not be complacent with just showing the YouTube video. At the same time, my experience has taught me that you can push people too fast and too far. And that's one of the things that I worry about when it comes to large organizations like Peabody, like Vanderbilt University, embarking on this work is, like you said, the diversity part, that's relatively easy, despite what some people say, like, oh, it's a pipeline issue. It's not a pipeline issue. Okay. I run a co-op that I just started 2 months ago. We have 5 Black male teachers because that was my intention, so it is possible. It's not a pipeline issue. But when the going gets tough, when the professors push back, when they're not willing to sit in discomfort and ask the hard questions and be vulnerable, and some of the disagreements arise, Vanderbilt's in a red state, if you will. It's in Tennessee, across the border from Mississippi. There is bound to be a wide range of views and thoughts about what social justice means. Why is it important to even attend to? And my concern, and where I grow skeptical, is that when the going gets tough, will these organizations still commit to the work? When it's unpopular to do so, when grants are being threatened, there's a great story about Teach for America. And when they made these commitments to DEI, they lost a lot of money. They lost a ton of financial support. And so I grow a little worried about pushing people too fast, too hard, because I've seen what happens when folks aren't ready for that. And I've seen it kind of implode from the inside. And that's always my concern, particularly with large organizations like Peabody. And so, have there been, to your knowledge, certain commitments made? First of all, do the people that you work with seem aware of that, of the danger of some of the issue that arises? And have there been certain commitments made that said, when this gets hard, we're going to do A, B, and C to ensure that we remain committed to this work?
I think you just asked the $50 trillion question. It's an exciting question because the answer is no, as far as I'm aware. Have we said to each other, this will get hard? What will we do when it does get hard? It's not if it gets hard, right? It will get hard. And so I'm compelled by that question and sort of ready to think about, what we do because that's the sustainability piece. That's the sustainability piece. The one implicit bias training and the one workshop that doesn't create the sustainability. That might wake you up to a commitment and might make you think like, yes, I want to do this hard work. but how can you sustain that work when things get challenging?
Yeah.
And I'm so appreciative of that question right now. I feel like we could kind of sit with that for a while. But I'm thinking about you're saying, Ray, that when we push people too hard and too fast, that really this can sort of implode, right? And that you might wind up going back in time if you shut people down or push them into the danger zone, right?
I mean, Barack Obama himself says he thinks he was elected maybe 25 years too soon, and that what we've seen in these past 4 to 6 years has been a direct result of the country not actually being ready for a Black president.
Well, I think it's like a sort of a push and a pull, right? We can wait, we're sort of paving the road as we go along. I think we have to get ready by acting ready and we have to act as if we're ready. And I think that the too fast and too hard can be mitigated by conditions. Mm-hmm. So what are the conditions that we can put in place that will allow for a more assertive pushing, for a slightly more aggressive timeline? Are there conditions that we can put in place? And I always come back to relationships, that if we can invest time and energy into relationships, and it doesn't have to take time, right, Ray? That was like the third week where you said that in that class. Mm-hmm. And from you saying that in that class and me responding to you, it was like you and I, something happened that day where you said, okay, she's okay. And I decided, okay, this is somebody that I'm going to stay connected with. And now here we are, several months later, having this conversation. So you don't have to wait for 25 years to establish strong relationships. We can do that quickly, and we can do that with support. When we do hard work together. So I think we do need some conditions. We need to think about those conditions that will support the hard work that needs to happen, maybe a little bit more accelerated than kind of waiting until we're ready, right? There has to be, that's the word deliberate that you use, right? What does deliberate mean? It means there's an urgency there. We're not going to spaz out and start doing things that are going to blow up, but we have to keep applying a kind of pressure and keep our focus on the day that everybody finishes a program and checks the yes box.
Yeah.
I felt like I belonged in that program.
Yeah, because on the flip of what Barack Obama said is what MLK said, talking about the urgency of now. A lot of people, look back on MLK now and they talk about him as if, he was this, mild, meek, peaceful person, just taking things one step at a time. But even back then, people were saying to him, hold up, you're going too fast. The South isn't ready, give people time to come around to these ideals. And so, it's a constant push and pull of, going faster than you think you may be ready to go, but not going so fast that you undermine the work. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about the conditions that have to be set up and the relationships. I'm looking at a couple of my classmates here, and I think that we have made those commitments to each other. Several of us in our cohort have said, you know what, when we're in class, if you raise a tough issue, I'm going to be there to back you up, and it makes all the difference when you build those relationships and you have other people, who are willing to push the envelope. There's a man here who's in one of our classes, and I brought up a tough thing one time, and he wasn't satisfied with how much time the professor gave it. And he said, actually, I want to go back to that thing and I want us to spend more time on it. It's those kinds of relationships and, kind of co-conspirator types of alliances that I think do help to push this work and are part of the conditions that must exist if we're going to be successful.
And, if we just deconstruct what you just said there for a second or two, those conditions are set as much by an instructor as they are by the students. So your classmate sort of created some conditions by demonstrating like that, I've got your back here and push the instructor. But that also means that instructors have to have a kind of flexibility and willingness to go with the flow sometimes and allow the space and hold the space and create the space for those kinds of alliances and collegiality to start taking root, right? Yeah. Both of those things need to happen. I'm changing my headphones out for a second because these guys are about to die. So just
okay, no problem. I think we're gonna open it up to questions here here in a second, but I did just want to. I have a million questions. I crafted like 12 questions or so. I'll wait for you to be able to hear.
Okay, we're good.
You can hear? Okay.
And you can hear.
I have a million questions I could ask, but I know we want to open it up to other folks to be able to ask something. Yep. But one last question I have for you is just, can you talk a little bit about, from your perspective, like what's at stake? I posted something on my Instagram yesterday, I think it was, that kind of got a lot of conversation going, basically saying, listen, regardless of who is president, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, there is a lot of racial equity work to be done. I mean, our country just is so divided in how we see things. And, whether you feel like that work is going to be easier under one president or not, the work remains. Like, my charge is still the same today, tomorrow, as it was 4 years ago. It just is.
Yep.
And so from your perspective, why is it so important that education institutions, particularly, get this right? What is at stake if we continue down the same path it seems like we're on right now as a country?
I'm an optimist. There's nothing I can do about that, no matter how hard I try. But when I think about what's at stake, I think there's a lot at stake. I don't believe that we have an endless supply of chances to get it right. I think that I'll go back to Stacey Abrams, who is such a hero of mine. We look at the work that Stacey Abrams is doing, and somehow that becomes a mirror or an indication of something. And it might get us too comfortable, right? Like, if Stacey Abrams can do that, then, we're okay. Like, democracy is still alive because look at what Stacey Abrams did. But I don't think we get an endless supply of Stacey Abrams. I don't think that we get to have the courageous conversations and write the departmental manifestos and set the policies and goals and write them down for everybody to see. There are websites. I'd encourage everybody to just putting in the chat bar that the Vanderbilt diversity landing page. I don't think we get an endless supply of chances to state things and then not follow through. And the worst thing that will happen, what's at stake is our optimism. Really, what's at stake is even our skepticism. If once we become cynical, we've lost it all.
Yeah.
Cynicism is virtually impossible to turn around. And I tell my students, no matter what you do, no matter what you read, no matter what you experience, whatever you do, if you can just stay on this side, like, be skeptical until the cows come home, right? Ask all the hard questions, be doubtful. But once you flip into cynicism, it's over. And that's what's at stake. That's what's at stake.
Yeah, agreed.
Which is everything.
Yeah. Okay, so I know that Hasina said that Lesley has a question. So
should we bring everybody back? It's
yeah,
so we can see everybody. Let's if folks want to, let's see people so we can remember that we're all here together. That's nice.
I actually see a few hands up. So Lesley, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, and then I see Jason and then Daniel. Lesley, you're on mute.
That would help. Hi, how's everybody? How Professor Rifkin?
Hi, Lesley. How you doing?
Good, thank you. So I was thinking about what you were saying, what both of you were talking about, and I sort of came into the middle of the conversation. But you were saying something about like we need to create conditions to sort of keep the work going, so it doesn't just become a box check, that it actually becomes something sustainable. And I think in order for it to get to that place, it has to be sort of institutionalized, and it needs to start at that lower level, like where I am on the elementary level, because we are having those conversations. But what the fear I have about that is the sustainability, even in this space. So I give you as an example, it's good to start talking about it, but being in this virtual space, of course, makes it very difficult because you can't connect with people. But the hardest part of that is it's like the child that gets the teacher that's really good in one grade, and they go on to the next grade and it's a good teacher. But then they get to the third grade and the teacher's crappy. So it's kind of the same concept as when you start this out, you may have a principal that's really good with getting that collaborative space and get that thought. But if the hands change and that's not the pressing item on the agenda and it gets pushed down, then it's like starting at ground zero all over again. And then that becomes pockets everywhere when the hands change. It is a mindset, and it is really hard to get into the minds of people to change that, where it can sustain and become the culture and climate that's represented in the school. You know, Professor Rifkin, you always talk about narratives, and that is a narrative that does not steep well into our school system. And if it was able to get rooted there, by the time it got to the level of where we all are now, that'd be a very different kind of conversation. It would look differently, and it would absolutely be embraced. So I don't know, we still are all trying to figure that out. How do we create those conditions in those schools to keep that leverage going? That is difficult.
I think that's a great focus for your 8110 final. Maybe
There
you
you
can,
go.
there you go. Like, right?
I will.
Yes. The how, it's like that, that old joke that probably most of you are too young or I'm weird to, like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall, right? You practice. We have to practice doing this work together. We have to keep entering into difficult, we have to do the thing that Ray was curious about, right? We have to kind of make some commitments, and the commitments look different than we are committed to, hiring people. We are committed to, like, those are commitments, but it's such a great question, Ray. Nowhere on that list of commitments or the goals does it say we are committed to going on even when it's uncomfortable. We are committed to figuring out how to be together in this work and to hold each other accountable as like critical friends, especially when things get hard.
Yeah.
It's like the it's the buddy system. It's the, it's the accountability buddies. It's when you're trying to exercise, right? Or trying to lose weight or trying to do anything that's hard and uncomfortable. When you have a friend that's going to meet you at the gym twice a week, somehow it's easier to get on the treadmill or whatever your machine of choice is when you're meeting your friend there, right? So can we have the equivalent of like, meet me at the uncomfortable space twice a week? Yeah. And let's do this. Because it does actually get easier the more you do it. The sitting in the space gets less uncomfortable. My ability to sit in that space for a very long period of time, I can tell you right now, it's not as uncomfortable as the way it was, say, 5-10 years ago. It's just a part of where I spend my time. I might be sitting up a little straighter and being more conscious, and maybe my adrenaline is slightly more elevated, but I'm not in a fight or flight situation. We have to find the alternative to the fight or flight. And it's a practice thing. Yeah.
With the commitments that you're talking about, I think grounding yourselves in a set of beliefs as well that you can always go back to. Like, let's remember what we believe. Let's remember what we said about why this work matters, how we view each other, how change happened. And so that when the moments get tough, you go back to your commitments to each other as people, but also your set of beliefs that are going to help, guide the work through those really difficult times.
And I know other people have questions, but just real quick, the story that you started with, Ray, there was like a part 2 of that you were never even aware of, which is that I went back into that recording and grabbed a clip of you talking about the spreadsheet. You're finding this out for the first time. And I didn't share it with anybody because I couldn't figure out how to share the clip. But I then started having conversations with a colleague of mine who's in the dean's office. And I said, you have to hear this story. And this is like, I can't direct a program that Ray King is going to leave and look back on and think, I didn't have enough scholars of color. I didn't get to read about issues that are important to me. I didn't have enough instructors. And it was that story that I go back to that, Ray. I mean, I have a few things, but that is one of the things that I have, that when things get hard, I say, Ray and her spreadsheet. I'm going in. I'm going to go be uncomfortable, because if I can't, I mean, how dare I retreat from the discomfort, right? That's like emotional white flight. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Right. If you can tell me, if you can be honest in a class on the 4th week, as vulnerable as you were, and tell me I'm keeping a spreadsheet and I'm worried about the readings, if you can have the courage to do that, and that was a gamble, you didn't even really know me at that point. If you can do that, then I can keep going into the hard conversations.
Nice. Well, yeah, I didn't know that. And I never even shared the spreadsheet with you, actually, because the work got so intense. I couldn't keep up with with everybody we were reading and all of that stuff. But cool. Jason, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rifkin and Ray, for this conversation. It's been wonderful. You were talking about the comrade or the person with you, and it was making me think of kind of my relationship with my wife and some of the common pitfalls where on one side there's this obliviousness where you may not be aware of a problem because you're not experiencing it. And then you get some information, maybe check the box training, or you get awakened or aware of something. And then you almost go to the other side of the pitfall, which is you have limited amount of information, but you have an arrogance of thinking you know what the solution is. And so if there's a journey that I know that I've gone through and that everybody sort of needs to go through, how can you systematically place tools or methods or approaches to have that consistency that Lesley was talking about that's so necessary? So if it is a personal journey people go on, how do you instill it as a system and make sure you're not oversteering your approach to one side of those pitfalls?
I don't know if that's questions for me or
I'm like looking at you, Ray.
I mean, I don't know. I think that in a lot of ways, that is the big question of DEI work, right? And like from what I've seen from the organization I was a part of, and to how it is a revolving door when it comes to bringing in people to work on DEI. And particularly, it tends to be overwhelmingly Black women who are brought in by these organizations as their new DEI director. And, they're there for a year or so, or maybe a little bit longer, and then they're out of there, right? And I think that it is some of that push and pull between recognizing that it is a personal journey, but then also recognizing that there's systematic work that has to be done. And I think it has to be a both and kind of thing, because what the history of this country teaches us, and if you read Ibram Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning, does a really great job of laying out the fact that policy changes and changing laws does not eradicate racism. It just doesn't. And it might make some things fairer on one end of things, but the reason we are where we still are today, even after slavery was abolished and the 1965 civil rights, the Voting Rights Bill and the Civil Rights Act and all that stuff was passed, the reason that we're still here is because there wasn't that deep heart and mind shift. And so I don't think that it's an either or question. Anyone who is seeking to lead this work has to recognize that you have to be simultaneously leading people through a personal journey and also helping your organization work through systematic policies that are going to create a fairer environment. I think it's both and. Eve, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I couldn't have said it better myself. You can't have one without the other. The top-down policies might make people compliant, but then you run into all kinds of sort of nefarious behaviors where people are doing just enough to sort of meet the criteria, but the work is not authentic and in fact can become dangerous if people are not really fully committed. If you only do the heart and mind work, then you've got the people that are willing to sit in that space, and there's nothing. So you need the infrastructure that takes the heart and mind work and sort of helps it spread. It's a scaling. Like entrepreneurs know how to scale their ideas. We have to think about this almost as in an entrepreneurial way. How do we scale the heart and mind work in our institutions? Yeah. I don't have the answers, but I like having I think having the conversation is like one of the answers.
I was going to jump in just for a second because I totally agree with both of you. I think one of the challenges is that systems work is often really slow and hard to see. And how do we make that transparent and visible to people? Because the heart and mind work is what people tend to see and what people tend to focus on. But like, you're absolutely right. You have to have both and, but the systems work takes longer, and is often less visible. And yeah.
Okay, and Daniel.
Hi there.
Dan, look at your blue wave. I just noticed, I just made the connection just now. I'm a little slow here today.
I still have my fingers crossed. So we're counting on Georgia, right? The runoffs have got to come. That's what we need now after Biden gets certified. So anyways, I wanted to, I love this conversation, and I just want to pipe in to ask about, some concrete actions, some things that you're talking about, commitments. And I know that there's some steps that are underway with the Student Advisory Council and things of that nature, but I want to explain a situation that occurred for my coursework that I feel and with the instructor had the best intentions. So I'm going to keep the names out of it to keep the innocent protected here. But foundationally, like, I see there's a little bit of structural dissonance in the program and how it's defined that is potentially going to make it more difficult to make changes. And my example is to elucidate what I mean there. And from my perspective, this commitment and, how do you show the structural work? To me, like, there are certain things programmatically you could do, like, have a policy of any D&I topic that you want to raise anonymously could be dropped into this Dropbox here, and nobody's going to take, there's not going to be any retaliation. There's not going to be any, negativity. It's going to be a positive experience of working out the details, not reporting a problem, but identifying a level of uncomfortableness that probably should be addressed in a proactive and allied versus, challenged format. And so let me explain my scenario, and then, and then we can come back to that, or you guys could do whatever you want with it. But, we literally had this very poignant class where the instructor, on the eve of William Floyd's death, we had this class and everybody starts talking about stuff, right? And people are bringing their authentic experiences. And it was a great moment for the instructor, who really was leading with empathy and trying to provide a space for us to connect and to establish some degree of perspective or shared perspective, you know, to understand how other people of color in the course might be feeling at that moment and how things were going along, right? So that was wonderful, but out of that came a woman of color's suggestion that diversity as a topic should be interjected in the class. The instructor agreed and said, "That's great, but why don't you give me some readings to make that happen?" And to me, I thought, number one, that was unfair, because you're the instructor, you're the PhD, you're leading the class. Where do you need us to give you guidance on what diversity elements could be interjected? But okay, fine, I'll give you a list. I did a research string. I gave the list. The instructor shared that list with the professor, the doctor whose name is the official course content creator, and it went nowhere.
You know, Dan, you George Floyd, right? Not William Floyd.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry about
that. That's fine. Just to you know, you're bringing up something that is, you know, it's a broader, right? It's like, here's the sort of case that we could study, but kind of more broadly, like the issue is that when things are not tended to in a way that feel like they kind of move the needle on that sense of belonging, right? Then what do we do? And I think that we have to decide: do we put something in a you know, a sort of suggestion box? Do we make time after class to have a one-on-one? Some of the most powerful movement I've ever seen have come from students taking the courageous step and saying, "Can I talk to you at some point after class," and sharing kind of what an experience felt like. That can be very powerful. Does the student feel safe enough to do that? Again, and then how our instructors talk. You know, when I meet with my LLO faculty, we have conversations about, you know, the kinds of things that come up and how can we support each other in grappling with these sort of complex situations, that they don't have to be so difficult if we're not afraid of them. So I think, you know, you bring up a good point. There's work to be done, right? There's work to be done. And instructors are always trying to figure out, you know, in every single moment. I mean, it is like air traffic control. Am I sticking to am I remaining faithful to the learning outcomes of the class and the syllabus? Or do I take a detour here and make time for this? Instructors are thinking about that every single class, and sometimes quick decisions get made. So I think what you bring up just indicates that there's more conversation to be had, right?
And I always find it tricky as that student who notices. Sometimes I notice when something is an issue, and sometimes I don't. Like, I was in a class recently, and a couple of my classmates were really bothered by a video that was shown, and it went completely over my head. Like, I was like, oh, what was the problem? Like, there was something, you know, problematic there or offensive there. And as a woman of color, I wasn't offended. I didn't notice it. But these two other people of color, they did notice it, and they were offended by it. And so some of it is, you know, through the lens through which we see the world. And then what I'm always asking Eve is, well, what do we do about that? You know, like, do you bring it up in class? Do you bring it up after class? Do you not bring it up at all? Like, Daniel, to your point, is there a drop box? Like, what do we do? And what do you do if you feel like the things that you've raised aren't going anywhere? You know, like, what is our latitude as students in this program to be able to push an issue to the point where we think, you know, we're actually going to need to see some change about it. Like, I don't know. All I know is for my friends and I in this cohort, you know, we've made a commitment to address things with each other and to bring them to our professors if we feel like that's what needs to happen after that point.
and that's one of those conditions that we're talking about, right? So if Ray, you're too exhausted to try to make your point one more time, then you can call your friend Craig and say, hey man, I'm tired, but this point needs to be made. And then Craig can say, I got you. And then Craig can do it, right? Because he's never going to be as tired as you are in around these types of issues, right? And so that is what we do. We create buddy systems, we create community, we make friends, and we have to keep pushing. And we have to start with the people that are the closest. We start with the instructor, we start with our classmates. And if we feel like it's not being handled in a respectful manner or a satisfying manner, then we gently push a little bit more. And you have to also not second guess your own instincts, right? If you feel like you're not being treated respectfully and with dignity, then that needs to be dealt with and addressed at a leadership level. We're at 2 minutes past the hour.
Are we done? Yes.
This was such a good
I would sit here and talk all day.
Thank you both for being here. Dee for sharing your thoughts, Ray for facilitating, and for everyone for your questions and comments in the chat. I think it's been such a great discussion, and hope we get to continue these discussions moving forward. I know in your we have a strong LLO showing today. I hope you guys join in our future conversations as we have more of these. And so I know this has been a very anxious time in our country's history. I hope you guys all take some good time for self-care, and we'll all be seeing what the next couple of weeks hold, and just want to make sure that everybody has that space and time for taking care of yourself. And want to just,
can we get a part 2?
We can.
Why not? Keep doing it.
We will work with Eve to see what we can do.
We will, yeah.
Post-election
conversation.
Yeah, keep talking. Yeah, and I just publicly want to Ray, thank you. I was nervous in the best possible way for this conversation, because I knew that you would come in with thoughtful questions, not afraid to push. And it's just such a pleasure to be in dialogue with you, ongoing dialogue. So I just could not appreciate you more. Thank you, Ray. You've made me a better instructor, and you've made me really a better program director by your efforts and determination. So thank you.
Thank you, Eve. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you all for engaging. And to my friends, Craig,
yes, our
Matthew,
LLO
and
people.
Gail, all you folks that I get to be in class with, Emily. Thank you all so much.
Yep.
Well,
Have a good rest of your day, everybody.